Hey there, it's Nalijay from High Latency, and I am bringing you a gold star run in Planetzoo time scenario from the Europe pack. It's Just a Matter of Time is the scenario name in the Alpine Zoo. So this was the first run that I did full through, as you can see. I entered the map a couple of times just to scope it out and try and get my head around what the map looked like, where the animals were, that sort of thing. But this was the first time I went through and actually did a run trying to get through it. Now, the unfortunate thing about this map is that you begin in a snowstorm, which is not helpful, particularly if it's your first time trying to play this time scenario. You can't see anything. The objectives in this scenario are adding 8 habitat animals for a total of 20 at 75% welfare, finishing the train tracks, 3,000 guests, 18,000 profit, and having 4 animal talks in a year. The first thing that I went ahead and did was just grab some animals that I thought were reasonably priced in terms of conservation credits, because I wanted to get some animals that had a high appeal. Now, I foolishly went ahead and purchased a grizzly bear because I forgot that there are already grizzly bears in the zoo, so do not purchase a grizzly bear. However, all the other animals you see me acquire went towards the 20 habitat animals goal. Now, this is not something that I usually do, but when I did my sneak peek at the map, I noticed after a year of just running the game without really touching anything, the operational costs were the most expensive in the wages. And you can see here that a lot of the staff, even the caretakers, are trained really well. But that means they're also very expensive. So the first thing I did was went through and fired everybody. Do not recommend in real life, but I fired everybody and replaced them with 1-star employees. I don't believe there's an option to demote people, so firing was my only option to keep the staff wages down. Next, I turned to the animals and released a bunch into the wild and used those credits to get some more animals to put towards the 20 total different species. I noticed in this zoo that there were a lot of multiples that weren't needed. So if an animal only needed one other animal, for example, to be happy, I noticed there was actually quite a lot of extras there. And so just to kind of keep the feed costs down, because to get that profit that we were looking for, one of the goals is yearly profit 18,000. Just getting rid of some of those excess animals to try and keep those feed costs down. And, I realize that some of these animals aren't that expensive, but I thought also with our newly less skilled workforce that it would be easier for them to manage if there were fewer animals in each habitat. So then I started to look at what animals I could bring in. And my strategy was to use existing areas of power so that I wasn't buying any new transformers, which would cost money, or just any environmentally friendly options that would have that cost as well. So I identified a couple of areas that had some space. One of them was this area near the gondola ride, which was a powered area, and as you can see, there's a lot of space here. So this is me trying to build a bridge over the path. It just ended up being really wonky. I don't know why. Probably because I started it on the angle, the curve of the path there. Anyway, so I figured I could get a very spacious 4 habitats in here, and my plan was to use some of the higher appeal animals in this area, which a lot of them are meat eaters and also require a lot of space. So that worked out quite well, putting them in here, which means they could just go in. There was already a staff room, just needed to put that keeper hut in, and join up the staff paths. I don't think it would be too expensive if you wanted to branch out onto some of the outer sections, but I figured the staff zones are already set up. You already have guests coming through this area, so why not work off that? You'll see throughout I kind of try and adjust the work zones a little bit. That was probably the thing I had the most issue with, was the work zones. If I had more time, if it wasn't a time scenario, I probably would have paid more attention to that, but I just was kind of trying to do it on the fly to try and meet those objectives. So when I'm doing the time scenarios, I learned from watching other people that you know, when you're doing it slowly at your own pace, of course you put in your animals and you make sure their welfare is all good, they have their enrichment items and everything like that. But when you're doing the timed ones, it's better to just make sure they have the basics that they need, because in terms of your goals, raising an animal's welfare status or percentage is actually a lot faster than, it's a pretty fast thing to do, really, assuming you have all of the enrichment items that you need unlocked, or at least the bare minimum. That's something that can be done fairly quickly, whereas some of the other objectives, so for example putting in 20 animals, it doesn't really take that long, but it does take time depending on the number that you're putting in. So with this one, I've tried to focus on the objectives that can't be done quickly. So in my mind, having the animal talks and building the transport ride, putting the, increasing welfare, they're all things that you could do fairly quickly. It was more the profit, the attracting guests, and obviously slowly over time putting the animals in. Those were the things I sort of focused on. So I just put in the African buffalo into the Africa habitat. I thought that was one I could just sneak in there and count towards the total animals that I needed to add. And so here was the other section, the other main section, where there was already power, a little bit of room. So I decided to put the tortoise and, is it Galapagos turtle or tortoise? Anyway, the turtle animals, they fit really nicely in here. And again, there's already your staff room set up there. You already got power, so it's just about being a little bit efficient. One thing that I kind of had trouble with these, I'm just going to call them turtles, was that I put them in that area, not realizing they were right next to really cold animals. I think it's timber wolves and I can't recall what the other one is on the other side, but they both had, very, very cold habitat, so that affected their welfare, and I had to fiddle with the heaters a bit. Now here you can see I'm struggling. It started with the start of my struggle. I just picked up the zookeeper. I'm like, okay, you can run around and take forever. I'll just pick you up and drop you here. Started to have some welfare issues with some of the existing animals, and I think it was a combination of the fact that the map is just so giant, but also because they have this area up here, and I'm pretty sure that you can't access this top inner mountain area on foot. You can only access it via the gondola ride. So the staff who don't get gondola rides, you have to literally pick them up and put them up there. I mean, that's what it seemed to be like for me. I couldn't see any paths. Maybe I'm wrong, but yeah, so I just had to grab my staff and plonk them up there. So they've got all of their facilities already up there. There's a staff room, etc. This cheetah kept escaping because I didn't put the walls up properly. So yeah, be careful with your cheetahs. So I'm going back and making sure that the existing work zones incorporate the new habitats, and then adding the giant panda in. And here's where we get the first objective met, which was to get the guest numbers up in the zoo. And I think the reason this pinged was just because I had been focusing on getting those higher appeal animals in to the zoo so that it would attract more guests. One other thing I did notice about this zoo when I ran it through for a full year before attempting the gold star was that there were a couple of transformers that had really large running costs, and in the end I didn't make changes to the power sources in this run, but it's either this area, I think it might have been this area or a similar area that had one of the most expensive transformers, and I figured out that if you replaced it with 2 wind turbines, it would have still covered the same power footprint and then would have saved you a lot of money. But I didn't end up doing that on this one. So here I'm getting protesters, which is good because, you've got to keep those guest numbers up. So I'm just trying to improve the welfare, and here's when I realized, oh crap, there's a whole bunch of snow coming in from I think that's the wolf's enclosure. Anyway, the snowy enclosure next door. So I changed the habitat barriers because these turtles / tortoises, whatever they are, had more than enough room for me to make their habitats a little bit smaller. I'm just increasing their welfare to try and get those darn protesters off my back. So as this was easy mode, I did have an hour and 20, which I didn't need the full amount, but I might have struggled if it was on medium mode because of the issues I had with the education talks and work zones. I've just realised here that I only have one objective achieved and it's 40 minutes in, so I started to get a little bit nervous. Decided to look at putting in the educator talks. I was just trying to do a platform or something into the African section and then gave up. My original idea was to have the educator talks be for some of the highest appeal animals in the zoo. But that was definitely a mistake because they were sort of Africa was on the other side of the zoo from where these are, and so that led to problems in terms of the educators getting over to the other one in time. And also obviously there's no power there, so instead of putting in more power, I just decided to move it across and have the talk with a different animal. So I put those talks into just their own little work zone so that I could assign the educators quickly. And then because you need 4 talks, I just decided to divide it between 2 educators so that there wasn't too much of a workload. And again, because it's such a big zoo, I was already kind of anticipating there might be a lot of walking involved. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend putting the talks, particularly for this scenario, so far away. Just looking at that profit being so close there. So I decided to put in the Formosan bear as my final animal, and I finally got the profit up, so that was at the end of year 2, so it wasn't too bad. Considering if you let the game run for a year, the finances are so bad. So I stuck the black bear over here, even though it's not particularly close to the staff room, just because again it was using that existing power source, and that gave me the final 20th animal in the zoo. That poor bear, I neglected it so bad. Another thing I did with this rail track is I just noticed when I was looking at the map that you don't really have to do anything fancy with it, as long as you put the track around the outer islands it's far enough, and join the 2 stations up, it is far enough that you will get the minimum distance required. So at this point, I've got all of the objectives except the education talks, and I am just now going back, since I've got some time, and working on increasing the animals' welfare. Oh yes, this happened. This was a bit of a nightmare because I thought I was about to, finish at the end of the year with my education talks because they were all set up. Why wouldn't they? And then it snowed, and I'm like, oh gosh, when you have all these animals who don't like the snow, and it snows and you don't have heaters set up, suddenly all their welfare just crashes. So that made me very nervous, but it didn't end up being too bad, and I didn't need to madly go through. And I think it snows a second time before the end, so I'm like, oh no, I'm gonna have to do this all again. But it was all right in the end. Luckily, I was very lucky that way. Yeah, so I really did have problems with the zookeepers looking after the animals sufficiently. And look, at the end of the day, as I said, it was a combination of things, probably a combination of the zoo being so spread out, possibly the work zones not being 100%, but also the fact that I fired all my experienced zookeepers and vets and mechanics, and basically replaced them all with trainees. So, of course there are going to be problems. Finally showing some love to my Formosan bear, who I may have forgotten about, but he was all right. He was a little bit hungry, needed a little bit of attention, but he survived, so it's all good. I do like doing these time scenarios, as some of them can be quite hard, but I also agree with the sentiment that instead of just whacking time scenarios into all the new expansions or DLCs, whatever you want to call them, it would have been nice to get more career maps, which I know they did at the time, but I guess for in terms of production costs, it would be more to have to get the voice actors back. That's probably why they just put timed scenarios in instead. Now I've noticed here that I haven't got those talks counted, and I wasn't sure why. I guess in hindsight, the year hasn't ticked over, so perhaps that was why it wasn't counted, although I do know that it ticks over and it still doesn't achieve that objective. So I decided to add a couple more educators just to be doubly sure that those talks were getting done. I'm starting to see here a lot of issues with the animals being hungry and animals being neglected, and I tried multiple times to correct the work zones to rectify this. And now we're at the end of year 4, so year 5 just started, and unfortunately I didn't get those educated talks, so I wasn't sure why that was happening. Considering I had 4 educators and 4 talks, you would think that there wouldn't be a problem in them giving talks across the year, particularly with them spaced out, but for whatever reason, maybe there's a really obvious reason that I'm just missing, I didn't get that, so I had to wait another year before it actually counted all of the talks. So I'm just going ahead and making sure all the animals that I haven't really been paying much attention to are happy, putting in their enrichment items, and you're lucky in this scenario that so many of the enrichment items are just unlocked. You don't have to worry about it too much. Yeah, see, everyone is just so hungry. These keepers. Maybe if I'd slowly started educating them over time, then it would have been a little bit more efficient, but for whatever reason I just focused on getting that animal welfare up. But yeah, as I said, if I hadn't puzzled over this animal management so much, I think perhaps I would have been able to do it quicker. But it was my first run through, so it's not going to be perfect. And there we go. That was it. Finally, the animal talks counted. So I unlocked all those statues and finished the scenario.
Thanks for watching. You can add me on Steam, Nali, Nali, and please subscribe to High Latency. Me and the High Latency crew put out videos on various games, and we'd love to have you along for the ride. Bye.